Well, welcome everybody. This is the Idaho Women Lawyers Meet the Candidate series. So those are many of you I know were here 2 weeks ago when we had Governor Otter come in, and I'm very pleased to have Balukoff, the candidate for governor, here. And as you remember, I'll just do a brief introduction of the overview, and then we have Christine Nicholas, one of our women lawyers, who will give a more detailed introduction of AJ. And as you remember, the Idaho Women Lawyers, we have been working very hard at improving the percentage of women in the judiciary in the state, also adding more women and diversity to boards and commissions. So the seat of governor is very important. So I want to encourage everybody to make sure they vote. And we passed out absentee ballots. We talked about the importance of having an absentee ballot. It makes it a lot easier. It gives you time to research all of the offices that are on the ballot. Or if you get sick with the flu or get called out on a trial or something, you make sure you don't lose a chance to vote. So if you want to fill those out, we'll actually mail them in for you. So we'll save you a step back. With that, go ahead and just pass it over to Christine.
Okay. Christine Nicholas. I practice with Moffitt Thomas. I am not a political operative, just a business, real estate, and finance lawyer. I came to really know and appreciate AJ when I was in-house at the Jerison Company, and the company asked me to serve on the board of Valley, Idaho. And that was around 2005, as I recall. Within a couple of years, Valley, Idaho went through some rather significant changes that you may or may not have heard about. The board made the difficult decision to sever a long-standing relationship with Eugene Ballet Company. This was a time of great financial uncertainty and quite a bit of stress for Ballet, Idaho, its board, and its supporters, as well as its employees and staff. AJ became board president during that stressful time, and he led the ballet through that challenging transition with calm deliberation. Calm deliberation. Never did we have a sense of panic at the board because AJ was leading us. I saw firsthand his ability to remain calm under pressure and to unite with one vision, people who held strong opposing views. Now, I think AJ admires the athleticism of ballet dancers, but I suspect it wasn't his personal interest in ballet as a dance or art form that brought him to serve on that board. And I know a number of you have probably served with AJ on boards of other organizations and know his commitment to give back to the community. So I believe it's his interest in community beyond himself that drove him to serve on the Ballet Idaho board and drives him to serve on so many other, and support so many other worthy organizations. And I think it's that love of community that drives him to seek to serve Idaho as its next governor. During my association with AJ through service on the board of Ballet Idaho, and as a parent who had children in public schools, including Boise Public Schools, I had a chance to observe and appreciate AJ's strong dedication to education. Ballet Idaho runs an academy school of ballet, and AJ showed special interest in that education mission. And even when our financial times were difficult, I never heard him say we should cut back on those education programs and education outreach. I think AJ will continue to lead us to invest in education because educated children are indeed our future. Education opens doors to better lives for our children and the rest of our population. Will develop a strong economy and a prosperous future for everyone who received that education and thereby for the state of Idaho itself. So it is my pleasure to introduce to you AJ Balukoff.
Thank you, Christine. It's a pleasure to be with you. And thank you all for coming and spending your lunch hour with me. This is going to be fun. I'll go home and report to my wife, Susie, that I had lunch today with 30 women lawyers. And Chuck.
Chuck Malloy is here with us. For those of you who don't know Chuck, he is a blogger and journalist. It's a political journalist that gets picked up by many newspapers across the state. So we're happy to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Christine, it's interesting how I got on the ballet board because I never really paid a whole lot of attention to ballet. But when Susie and I moved to Idaho 32 years ago, one of her avocations was singing. So she affiliated with the opera company in town and would sing in the opera chorus. And one of the things I found out is that every nonprofit board likes to have a CPA on their board. So when the opera company had that need, Susie volunteered me. So I became the treasurer of the opera company for several years, and then from there I was asked to be on the Philharmonic board for several years, and then they asked me to be on the ballet board. And you're right, I didn't really know much about ballet. I appreciated the athleticism, and it's really interesting to watch the lifts those men do. They're not much bigger than me. And when you get to see the women dancers up close, they're not all that small either. So I really appreciated the strength and the grace, and I have come to appreciate more and more that art form. So it was fun to spend about 10 years on the ballet board and help them through a very difficult transition period. And right now they're a very healthy community organization and a very good asset to our community. I mentioned that almost every nonprofit likes to have a CPA on their board, and so I've gotten lots of invitations to join boards. I've been on the Boise Public Library board I was on that for about 10 years. For 15 years, I served on the Children's Home Society board, which they do business as the Warm Springs Counseling Center, doing mental health counseling for children and their families. This room is familiar to me because I've been on the Boise School Board for 17 years, and for 8 of those years, I was the school district representative on the Compass Board, which is the Community Planning Association for Ada and Canyon counties. And that board, which is made up of almost all of the elected politicians in Ada and Canyon County, try to come together and make recommendations to the Idaho Transportation Department on how to spend federal highway dollars. And so every other month we would meet in this room, and then on the other months we'd meet in Caldwell. So it's a familiar room, and that was a good experience. Besides being involved in nonprofit activities, I did find time to be gainfully employed. I worked as a certified public accountant for about 25 years. Susie and I assembled some athletic clubs, and we had a chain of, one time we had 4 athletic clubs in town. We ended up selling those. Today I'm one of the owners of the Grove Hotel, CenturyLink Arena, and the Idaho Steelheads hockey team. And people with, I've never run for a partisan office before. So one of the questions I get is, why did you get into this? Why are you running for this office? And it centers around education. I've watched for too many years as our state has dropped to the bottom in education and job opportunity. And you can just take a look at, we always quote where we sit nationally and what we spend on public education. And we're next to the last. We're 50th. We kind of vary from year to year between about 48th and 50th. That has resulted in some, what I think are distressful things. 95 of 115 school districts have been forced to raise their own taxes through supplemental levies. And that's not to pay for supplemental programs in most cases. It's to just pay for basics, to keep teachers, keep class sizes down, to keep the lights on. 40 districts have gone to a 4-day school week. When you look at that situation, the disparity that supplemental levies have caused, you can't make a case that our state is honoring the constitutional mandate to establish and maintain the general, uniform, and thorough system of public education. It's just not happening. And I've traveled all over the state talking to superintendents, principals, and teachers. asking about what it's like in their district. The consistent thing I hear from superintendents is they would like some stable and reliable funding. Supplemental levies are good for just 2 years. And so if you're paying for an ongoing program with supplemental levies, you're kind of on thin ice because you don't know that you'll be able to pass that supplemental levy again in 2 years. So they'd like that. The other thing that they consistently mention to me is the difficulty they have in hiring and retaining teachers. I was over in Rexburg talking to the Madison superintendent, Jeff Thomas. He had 5 openings. He advertised nationwide. There were a couple science teachers and a math teacher. I forget what the other 2 positions were. He got no applications for those positions, none. And they have one of the most beautiful state-of-the-art high schools in the state. Their community passed a bond a few years ago, and they built this beautiful state-of-the-art high school with some great programs. I think it's probably the only high school in the state that has a fish program. High school kids are raising tilapia and they're raising trout. And they work with Fish and Game. The Fish and Game brings in the trout eggs. They raise the trout up to the proper size, and then Fish and Game directs them on where to stock those trout. So you've got high school kids learning about fish biology, raising fish, and that will be useful in the fish industry, or can inspire them to go into biology or some kind of a science. I was just really impressed. But it's amazing that superintendent has trouble hiring teachers. I hear that all over the state. The typical complaint is we hire beginning teachers, and then after 2 or 3 years, they get a better job in another state. In the western part, they go over to Washington or Oregon. Over in the eastern part of the state, they go to Wyoming or Montana, and sometimes down to Utah. So that's the main reason. Closely tied to education is the state of our economy and jobs. You know, we're number 2 in the percentage of minimum wage jobs. The biggest percentage of minimum wage workers are women. So the fact that we have a low wage economy affects women more than any other demographic, really. And then, you know, we're at the bottom in per capita income. I think we're 50th out of the 50 states in the District of Columbia. And if you saw the statistics recently, we're 51st in per capita income for women for governor, is to bring some balance to our state legislature. We've had a one-party monopoly for 20 years. And if you've observed what's happened, it stifles discussion and debate when you have one party in charge of things. They do things because they can, not because they should. And you can look at examples like the Luna laws, and I was down there talking to legislators in opposition to those laws. But and they were hearing from their constituents that those laws were very much opposed by teachers, by parents, by students, by educators, general public. When I would ask legislators, what are you hearing from your constituents? They say, I'm getting 1,000 emails a day. And they're all against it. Well, how are you going to vote? Well, I've got to read the bill and then I'll make up my mind. And I don't know if they read the bill or not, but they passed the law. And Governor Otter signed it. And you know what happened? Through the referendum process, we repealed those laws. And that goes on over and over and over again. So we need to bring balance, and not only balance, partisan balance, but our state government and so forth should represent the demographics of our state. And it's probably no secret to you that women are way underrepresented in all levels of state government. In your line of work, you can look at the judges, for example, and only about 15% of the judges in Idaho are women. And that can be changed. The governor has a real opportunity to change that. I've tried to give a message. One of the things the governor can do is lead by example. And that's what I've tried to do with my campaign staff. I've got 12 paid employees working for me. 7 are women, 5 are men. My campaign manager is a woman, Marie Hadaway. And I think it's important that people see that as a message that I'm interested in making sure that at all levels of government, even beyond the judges, but in our commissions and so forth, the various departments, that the women are adequately represented and the minorities are adequately represented. I've looked around, I've visited 3 of the Indian tribes in our state as part of the campaign. And so I tried to look to see if there's very much representation on boards for the Indians, the Native Americans, and there's not. So I think, and Hispanic is another one. There's not a whole lot of representation of the Hispanic population in our state government. So when I talk about the need for balance in our government, it's certainly, I'm talking about partisan balance, but I'm also talking about gender balance, ethnic balance. Our state government really needs to look like our general population and represent diverse views. And I think when we do that, we will get the kind of robust debate and discussion that we need so that the laws that we pass, the decisions we make, are in the best interest of the citizens of our state. I've probably talked long enough. I probably ought to open it up and let you ask questions about what's on your mind. That's my favorite part of the presentation, by the way, is the questions, because I learn a lot by the questions you ask on what's important to you. So with that, let me open it up. And I know the first question is always the hardest. Not for me, it's for you. Who wants to be first?
This group's not too shy about asking.
Okay, good. Good. I talked to high school classes, and I have to really pull out of them to ask the first question.
Right.
So who has a question over here? Yes. And by the way, would you speak really loudly? When I was a young boy, my grandfather wore hearing aids, and I was always fascinated by those. And my father wore hearing aids, and I have inherited that characteristic. So if you'll speak really loud, that would be good.
I want to just touch on 2 topics that were brought up when Governor Otter was here. So, because I think our membership will appreciate having, comparison, things to compare apples to apples. So,
Okay.
The 2 topics you actually touched on in your remarks, but I think we all appreciate a little bit more detail and specifics on what you would plan to do. And the first one is the judiciary. Getting more women appointed to the bench. What can the governor do? What is the role of the governor? The second topic is wage disparity between the genders. And there is a sort of a perfect storm effect for women because women are in state government in higher numbers than men. And state government is proportionally much lower than the private market. And it's also much lower than its sister state governments. So all those things combine to really depress wages for women. And we're wondering what you could do about those 2 things.
Okay. Well, let me handle them one at a time. First of all, on the judiciary, getting more women on the judiciary. First of all, on the Judicial Council that makes recommendations to the governor on appointments for judges. I believe there's just 2 women on that 7-member panel right now. And if I recall, the governor appoints 3 of those commissioners. I can make sure that first of all, we have some good representation on that, on my appointments. But even beyond that, I can ask questions of the people that appoint the other people on that commission about, do you think we have enough representation for women on that commission? I think just asking the question starts to raise the awareness. And I would then also encourage that we really need some diversity. Not only women, but I don't know if we have any ethnic minorities on that commission. But we need to raise the awareness in both of those areas. And then, and you didn't really ask this on the rest of the commissions, but the same thing should happen with the other commissions of the state in the departments. We need to be raising the awareness of of how many women there are and how underrepresented women are in our state government, and draw comparisons to the states around us. So I think just having the discussion starts to raise the awareness and indicate, and I can say I want to appoint women. So make sure that you, as you're recommending qualified men, make sure there's also some qualified women so that I have an option to appoint women. And then the other is the diversity in pay. Again, that's raising awareness is what that disparity is. It seems like some of the larger companies that are not just centered here, but centered nationwide, have started to address that. You see more and more women in executive positions. I don't know what they make. They don't advertise that, but at least that's a start to again raising awareness of pay inequities. Now, where we could make a difference is in our state on what we pay. I'm sure I've not looked at the compensation of our judges, but if I were to guess, I would guess it's similar to compensation in the world of education, where we pay our teachers lower than any of our neighbors in the Northwest, and probably against most states. If I would guess, I would guess probably the same thing is true of our judges. And if we can find a way to raise the pay of our judges, it might be more attractive to women to apply for those positions. Because I'm guessing a lot of people don't apply because they have to take a pay cut if they were a judge. And if that's the case, you're probably not getting the best people applying for those positions. Yes?
I wanted to ask you about your position on the Medicaid money that the state of Idaho has chosen not to take on. And what is your position on that, and how would you handle that issue if you were governor?
Okay, good question. I get this all the time, and it's one of my favorite questions because I'm very much in favor of Medicaid reform to where we do expand the coverage. And that was really designed to be part of the Affordable Care Act, because the people that fall in that gap earn so little that even the subsidies don't help them buy insurance. So the plan all along was for states to expand the coverage of Medicaid to cover the people that don't earn enough money to qualify for a subsidy. And it makes financial sense, and that's how I would sell it to the legislature. Well, I would start talking with the people that are reasonable, that pay attention, and it's a good time to do it would be next year when it's not an election year. So talk about that. But the fact is that you and I are already paying for people that are not covered by insurance, and we're paying for them in the most inefficient and expensive place. If someone doesn't have insurance and they really need to see a doctor, or at least if they think they really need to see a doctor, they show up at the emergency room at one of the hospitals. And the hospitals are obligated to care for them, even when they know they can't afford to pay. So who pays for that? Well, all the counties have an indigent care fund that picks up the first $11,000 of their care. If it costs more than that, the state catastrophic fund will pay some of that. And then, of course, the hospitals write off the bad debts or the charity care to some extent. And those bad debts, charity care, is part of the cost of doing business that goes into figuring their charges for different services in the hospital, which of course affects how much you and I pay for health insurance premiums. So we are paying for uninsured people right now between our county property taxes, our income and sales taxes, and our health insurance premiums. And I don't know how much it's costing us in health insurance premiums, but I've heard estimates between the county and the state. We are paying between $80 and $90 million a year to care for uninsured people. Now, we are already paying into the federal government when we file our income tax returns, and we pay in federal income tax. Federal government has said, we will give that money back to you in the form of Medicaid payments if you will expand the coverage of Medicaid. That would free up somewhere that $80 to $90 million a year that I know county commissioners are wondering how they're going to maintain roads, or they've got other needs where they're struggling to how to pay for things. It would free up money at the state level that maybe we could put into education instead of caring for uninsured people. So it just makes financial sense to do that. I had that same question up in McCall several months ago, and I gave that explanation I just gave to you. And then I had a gentleman in the audience raise his hand and said, let me tell you why we should expand Medicaid coverage. He said, I'm an emergency room physician here in McCall. And about a week ago, so this is several months ago, a woman brought in her 8-year-old daughter with severe abdominal pains. And in diagnosing what was going on, I asked how long she'd been experiencing these pains. About a week. And he said, well, why did you wait so long to bring her in? Well, I don't have insurance. I can't pay for this. But it's so bad. I was hoping the pain would go away. And he said, I examined her. She was having severe acute appendicitis. And it was so bad that I didn't feel confident that we should do the surgery in McCall. So we life-flighted the little girl to Boise and did the surgery in Boise. And the good news is the little girl recovered and she's doing just fine. The bad news is if the mother had brought her in early on, that in her bill and everything would have come to about $7,000. But the way it turned out, the bill is over $100,000. And you and I are paying for that. So that's why I'm in favor of expanding Medicaid coverage.
One of the other questions that came up from, I know somebody who wasn't here, who was not here this time, but was last time. I think we've mentioned that Idaho Women Lawyers has been very active in getting more women to apply for the judicial positions and really helping with coaching on interviews and different things. One of the feedback we got about why women aren't applying is the pay, which you've already addressed, but also the feeling that it was such a political process that they didn't even feel like they could try. How would you address that?
Well, and that's not only in appointments, but it's the way this administration has let out contracts. One of the things I hear all over the state is the description of cronyism in Governor Otter's administration. And it's cost us money from whether the way they let out the broadband contract for schools, the mismanagement of the private prison south of Boise, the wrongful discharge suit for the Idaho Transportation Department director. You just give a whole list of that kind of political inside dealing, cronyism, and appointments are the same kind of thing. And the governor needs to make a commitment to appoint the best qualified people. The governor needs to make, and I would, as governor, make the commitment that we would strive for diversity, for balance in our government. And I would ask bodies like the Judicial Council to make recommendations to the governor, but that's one of my goals. And so I would want them to not just recommend men, for example, or for that matter, just recommend women. I'd like to have a choice each time. And I think that's how we address that. And that message has to get out, that it's not going to be business as usual where we appoint our friends. It's a mistake to appoint your friends unless you can show unequivocally that they are the best qualified or have unique qualifications that you can't find anywhere else. It just looks bad when you appoint friends and campaign contributors.
Other questions from the audience, or other questions you remember from last time that you want to ask again?
Yes.
I have another question. It addresses agriculture in Idaho and alternative energy. What is your position on those things in terms of trying to fix some of the economic woes of Idaho in regards to any programs to try to have more alternative fuels, and whether agriculture could be involved, like in ethanol or methanol, the different areas? What is your position on that?
Okay, I'm very much in favor of exploring alternative energy sources, getting away from fossil fuels as much as possible. when you drive to eastern Idaho, you see lots of wind. I'm surprised we haven't seen a whole lot of solar with all the sun we get here in Idaho. It'd be nice to see some research on solar. A few months ago, I read about somebody up in North Idaho developing those panels that go on the side of the road, on the shoulders, which to me seems like a great solution, especially along I-84 and some of the other roads with all the sun we get in the summertime is creating electricity from the sun. And I know out at the INL, they are researching things like that, how to get solar and wind energy integrated into the grid, which, and I don't understand this, I'm not that technical, but apparently that's an issue on how to get that kind of energy into the electric grid that we have. I'm very much in favor of that. I think we have to be really careful about when they look into, I know over in the western part of the state, they're starting to get natural gas over there, and there's been some proposals to do the fracking, and I would be very, very cautious about that to make sure that whatever we do isn't contaminating the aquifer, which is basically the lifeblood of our state. So, I'm in favor of that. I think we have to be doing research. There's research grants that we could get there. I know at INL they've got a partnership over in Idaho Falls between INL and the 3 universities, Boise State, Idaho State, and University of Idaho. It's called the Center for Advanced Energy Studies, that is studying alternative energies, and I'm very much in favor of that. They've gotten a lot of grants to do that research.
It's good you mentioned INL because our groups in Idaho Falls in the eastern area.
Oh, okay.
Any questions you think they might want to hear eastern or northern Idaho too? Any other questions there?
I don't know that they can ask. I think we're on.
Oh, I know, but I just meant for you guys.
Oh.
Other questions that
You can ask for them.
Yes. I got Laura, you had some good questions already. So anything else you wanted?
Well, I was just thinking, the governor had talked about going back to the judicial appointments. The governor had indicated that his thought on judicial appointments was, I'm not going to go out and actively appoint women and minorities, kind of like the Governor Anders did back in the 80s. I'm going to select the best person for the job. I would like you to sponsor your thoughts on that approach based upon what you said about appointing more women to the bench.
Well, my response when you were saying that is the underlying assumption that there are not qualified women and minorities. And I reject that assumption. There are qualified women and minorities, and I would like them to be recommended from these commissions to the governor. And I would actively appoint women and minorities because I think there are very qualified women and minorities that could do just as good a job as the well-qualified men.
I really appreciate that because we've talked to the governor a couple of times, and he started appointing women after he met with us several years ago. And I think in part because we gave him such a bad time about it.
So it raised the awareness a little bit, and that's where it's got to start. You have to raise the awareness of the governor, and the governor can then start raising awareness of
I truly think that's
commissions and
exactly what
everyone
happened
else.
A few years ago. I don't know if we should really take credit for that, but I think we do a little bit as a group, not just any one of us, but that he started appointing a few more women after that. I think that that's a priority for us. So thank you very much for your answer.
Sure.
I have a question about your background. You indicate you're an accountant, and can you tell me basically what kind of accounting you were in, and also how you would use your accounting qualifications if you got elected as governor, and how that would be different in what maybe Mr. Otter has done?
Okay. Yes, I went to college at BYU, graduated with a degree in accounting. And of course, when I was in college, you had choices of business management, personnel, marketing. And I chose accounting because I thought that gave a skill and a background that was more valuable than those other kinds of business degrees. And that was verified even in college when I took a finance class that everybody, my fellow business majors dreaded that class, Finance 412. They said, oh, it's a killer class. And I went to that class and it was like a review of beginning accounting. It was very easy for me. Upon graduation, I took a job with Arthur Andersen in Los Angeles, and I was on the audit staff there. They had me specialize in hospital audits and doing Medicare reports and Medicaid reports. Of course, in California, they were called Medi-Cal reports. But so I did that. We lived in Los Angeles for 12 years. I worked for Arthur Andersen for about 4 years, I think, and then I left to go to work for a small CPA firm. It was a father and son partnership. The father was getting ready to retire, and we thought that was a path to become a partner in that firm. That didn't work out that way because another big firm, Moss Adams, made a great offer to my friend's father. So we then became employees of Moss Adams, and did the same thing. Did a lot of audit work, taxation work. And then my wife and I decided we wanted to find a better place to raise our children than Los Angeles. So we moved to Boise, Idaho. My mother-in-law grew up here, graduated from Boise High, and they highly recommended Boise. So we moved here, and I just started practicing out of my house as a certified public accountant. And eventually was able to move into an office, eventually took on a partner, took on more partners, hired people. We eventually grew that firm into one of the largest firms in Boise. It was called Balukoff Company. When I sold, I think there was about 20 of us between the partners and the staff. Since then, my former partners have sold to Eide Bailly, and now they're known as Eide Bailly. But we did auditing, tax work, just kind of a general CPA firm practice. We got involved in a lot of different industries, from governmental industries. We audited, remember the old ABC Bank that used to be out on Fairview? We audited that bank, and just a whole bunch of different kinds of companies. It was a lot of fun. I just got busy with the athletic club, which was even more fun, and sold and did the athletic clubs full time.
So the follow-up question she was asking was, how will you use that accounting background differently, perhaps, than the government currently?
Sure. One of the values of accounting and the background I've seen in a lot of different industries is the understanding it gives me of finances and how business runs. At one time when I was a CPA, we did a little research. I don't know if this is still true, but we looked at the Fortune 500 companies, at the CEO, and what was their college degree and what was their background in. And accounting was the most common background for CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. I don't know if that's still true or not. It wouldn't surprise me if it is. I think it would give me, and it will give me a much better understanding of how government is run, how the economics of government works, and as Governor Otter explains, he likes to have private enterprise do its magic. Well, it's not magic. You know, it takes some understanding, the correct principles, and I believe my background in accounting and working in a lot of different industries, understanding the tax code gives me a great understanding. I very much, I hope I'm not getting off topic here, but I very much like to do a comprehensive evaluation of our state system of taxation. When we first moved here, people used to be very proud of the three-legged tax stool that we had here of income, sales, and property tax. That the weaknesses of one kind of tax, the strengths of one kind of tax overcame the weaknesses of a different kind of tax and made it for a very stable revenue source for our state. And I think that's gotten out of balance. And are we using taxes to pay for the right kinds of things these days? I understand taxes, and I'd like to preside over a comprehensive evaluation of our tax system and see if we could make it more efficient, make better use of technology. The prime example I use on that, what I mean by that, is the grocery tax credit. You know, that's a carryover from the 1950s and 60s when we didn't have a good way of tracking what would be tax exempt. I mean, most people agree we shouldn't be taxing groceries. So our attempt to make groceries tax-free is to give you a tax credit on your income tax return, which at best is an estimate of what you may have spent on sales tax for groceries. Well, today with barcodes, you can barcode each item and exempt it right there, so you don't have to worry about filing to get your grocery tax credit, which would benefit a lot of seniors who don't earn enough money to have to file an income tax return, and the only reason they would file it is to get the grocery credit, if they even know they have to do that. And like my parents, didn't know they had to do that, so they never got the grocery credit.
And then going along that same line, I'm aware that, you know, you're taxing food at 6.% and yet other states aren't doing that. They just tax goods, but then we're not taxing any online sales for foreign, you know, other, like Amazon or whatever. If they don't have their business in Idaho, oh good, they don't, if it's an online sale, they don't have to pay any sales tax, whereas a business that's in Idaho who's an online has to. Isn't that correct? I think, isn't that a bit unfair?
Yeah,
Could you change that?
Yes, that's, you know, it's already in law that we have, that our online purchases, catalog purchases are subject to sales tax. But the the state government burdens all of us to keep track of those purchases and then pay that sales tax when we file our income tax return. Now, I won't ask how many of you actually do that because there's only about 3 or 4 of us in the state that do it. I'm an accountant, so I keep track of that stuff, and I do pay that every year. I keep track of my online purchases, and I pay the sales tax. But it's a burden to keep track of that. And it also, as you pointed out, puts our Idaho businesses at 6% competitive disadvantage to the online retailers. And so we need to work with the other states and work up a treaty to require all of those online retailers to collect the sales tax and remit it to the state of Idaho. They do it for a lot of other states. You can see that if you're in, they'll tell you when you order, if you're in one of these states, you have to calculate the sales tax, or they will calculate it for you. And they collect it and remit it to the state. Idaho needs to get on board. I don't know how many millions of dollars we're leaving on the table because we don't do that. I've heard estimates, the low estimate I've heard is $45 million a year, and I've heard a lot higher estimates. I don't know how much it is, but it's money that we ought to be collecting, but it's also helping our Idaho businesses be more competitive with the online retailers. Yes.
What's your position on state employee compensation? The Office of Personnel Management did a study of base compensation, including PERSI and health insurance, which are clearly above market. The benefits are clearly above market, but base compensation itself is well below. But even looking at it in a composite manner, the state employees fall below market. And how does that affect the caliber of employees and the productivity of state employees that we pay for?
Yeah. What's always advertised is your paycheck. You know, even though people know about benefits and so forth, what they really compare is how much you're making per hour. And I don't know of any company that tries to hire the best employees by paying the lowest wages. It just doesn't work. And as we went through the recession, state employees did not get raises, even cost of living raises, for 6 years. And that caused a lot of people to leave the state, or to leave the state employment and look for jobs elsewhere, or retire early if they qualify. Again, we need to take a look at our compensation package and make sure it's competitive. And that's for all state employees. That's true in education. That's where I see it most directly is the teacher pay, when we pay educators. That's not competitive, but it's not competitive in the statewide. Idaho, and function similar to this. And there was a lady there from someplace in the state of Washington who told me that the word in the state of Washington is don't go to Idaho to be a teacher. So absolutely, we're not getting the best employees. Yes.
So you mentioned your experience in education and your opposition to the Luna laws and the problems with the supplemental levies with the need for stable funding for schools. So do you think that funding for our schools is the primary issue, or do you think that there's other issues in Idaho's education system that need to be addressed apart from funding?
Oh, absolutely. Funding is just one of the issues. You have to teachers, and I have all over the state, they want to be paid a fair compensation amount. These proposals for pay for performance are very offensive to teachers. They're not in it for the money. In fact, you know, if they wanted to make a lot of money, they wouldn't have gone into teaching in the first place. So if you think, what's the logic behind, you know, if they're not motivated by money, what's the logic of offering them a bonus if their kids score better on tests? It's just offensive to them. But it's the environment, the teaching environment that several teachers have described it to me as toxic. They feel very disrespected. They're blamed for all the problems in education, and a lot of it is not their fault. There's a lot of micromanaging from the State Department of Education and from the legislature. When the legislature allocates the public school funding, they dictate how to spend about 80% of that. Line items. Here's how much you spend on salaries. Here's much, you know, right on down the line. It takes a whole page, and most of it is line items. And then one of the proposals that's out there now is this tiered licensure proposal. It's out for comment. The teachers hate that. There's a lot of opposition to that. And it's micromanaging. It's telling principals how to evaluate their teachers, as if they don't know how to do that already. There's a lot of things we could do to improve education, and pay for performance, tiered licensure, tying teacher evaluations to test scores are not the way to do that. One of the big priorities in our state should be a pre-kindergarten program. If we really want to raise student achievement, let's give every parent the option of enrolling their child in a pre-kindergarten program. I was up visiting the Basin School District, Idaho City, about 3 weeks ago. And they are very proud of the preschool program they have. They've had it for 15 years. And it was started with a grant from the Albertson Foundation. When that grant ran out, they've kept the program alive through their federal forest money, and their community passed a supplemental levy to pay for preschool. So they've had this in place for 15 years, and they say it makes a big difference. More kids are prepared to learn, they do very well. So the next day I came back to Boise, and our superintendent, Dr. Coberly, called me up and said, hey, I just got the state Idaho reading indicator numbers for fall, the IRI scores. They give those from kindergarten through third grade. Now, the fall IRI is given about in the first week of school. So think of this, these are brand new kindergartners. They've had no instruction in school. It's their first week. So what does it measure? It measures their readiness to learn to read. So it's things like identifying letters of the alphabet and just real simple things for you and I would see. But it measures their readiness to read. He tells me that the state readiness percentage for these kindergartners is somewhere in the neighborhood of like 60% or 56%. And the Boise district was up there at almost 70%. And then he started talking about some of the districts that are down at 20%, 24% of the kids are ready to learn to read. So I said, Don, look at the Basin School District. What's their percentage? And he goes, oh, they're at 82%. So, and then we compared that to several other districts around the state with similar demographics, small rural districts with demographics like Idaho City. Their peers were in the mid-20s, the ones we looked at. So that's how we would make, I mean, those are some of the things that we ought to be looking at. So it goes way beyond just the better funding.
Following up on that question, are there any merit pay proposals or structures you do support? You mentioned the difficulty in recruiting math and science teachers, especially because the discrepancy in the market is bigger.
Yeah. You know, I really don't like merit pay programs. There's been lots of study. I don't know if anybody's ever read the book Drive by Daniel Pink. Anybody familiar with that? Nobody? It's a great book. He reviews the study on human motivations. The studies have been going on since the early 1940s. Basically, what his conclusions are is money is not a motivator. And in fact, in many cases, money is a demotivator. And there's lots of studies to prove that. And his recommendation is the best thing you can do, like for education. He addresses in one chapter, he addresses education. And he said the best thing you can do is pay your teachers adequately so money is taken off the table. And then you use other things that motivate them. It's more of an internal motivation. And really that's what drives teachers, is they believe in the altruistic mission of educating the rising generation. And you help them fulfill that motivation. Now, there is a difference, and the teachers don't like this, but there is a difference between the ability to fill your math and science teachers versus music teacher, English teacher, history teachers, things like that. And I believe that there's room for differential in pay based on hard to fill positions, hard to fill areas geographically. Part of the disparity is created because sometimes people don't want to go live in a small rural community. They don't have all the amenities that you have living in Boise. They don't have a ballet company or an orchestra, or they don't have the other shows that come to town that people want to see. Now, the Rolling Stones don't stop at Orofino. So there's those kinds of things that makes it really difficult to go recruit teachers there. So maybe there ought to be some differential or some advantages to going and teaching in some of these hard-to-place districts. And perhaps we ought to be looking at some kind of a program of student loan forgiveness if they teach in these hard-to-place positions or geographic locations. So there's room to do that, but it's going to take some work because the team say, you know, all these courses are necessary, and they are. I firmly believe that music courses, physical education courses are just as important as the STEM courses. And so the teachers don't see any reason to differentiate the pay between them. But I think when you've got hard to fill positions, hard to fill locations, that there ought to be some kind of pay differential to make it easier to hire and retain the teachers.
Thank you. And AJ has agreed to stay after, so if any of you have follow-up questions, he's willing to stay. Would you join me in thanking AJ Balukoff?
Thank you.
And don't forget, if you fill out your form, give it, hand it up here, we'll mail it in for you. Tell your friends, vote, vote, vote.